Hello everybody, my name is Gwen Campbell-Mindes and welcome to Mom's Favorites, Books My Mother Loved, a memorial to my mother as we start to see the tail end coming up possibly of this particular series. I'm about to start the final set of books that were on my father's list of a selection of books that my mother had a particularly powerful affection for. One of the themes of this was that my mother really liked big books. She liked having books where you start reading it and you just keep on reading and reading and reading because it's a really long book. And the thing is, I like big books too. This does not always come across in this series, mainly because, of course, when I'm reading books for something like this, and I have exactly 1 week and I'm trying to punch it through, and I have other things that I have wanted to read instead, I do have a tendency to default to shorter books, so there's that. But this next book is part 1 of a 6-book series. The 6-book series is the Palliser Novels by Anthony Trollope, and this is the first book, Can You Forgive Her? The edition that I have, it has some illustrations in it. They are credited to one Lynton Lamb. And the thing about this, this particular one is, and the jacket illustration is apparently by Antony Maitland. Who knew? This particular edition is a deceptively thin book, and by thin I am of course being a little bit tongue-in-cheek because it's not a very thin book at all, but it's deceptive because all the pages in this are tissue paper thin. And this is a book that is some approximately, give or take, 800 odd pages long. And all the other books in this series, in the collection of all 6 that we have on our bookshelves here at home, are all from the same release, the same Oxford University Press release, and thus it looks like it is a series of 6 books, each of which is probably about 800 odd pages long, so these are a heck of a thing to get through. Especially because I am not the world's biggest fan of 19th century literature, which this is. Anthony Trollope is one of the Victorian authors. And so it's a book that comes out of a very specific point in time, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't always had this problem reading period literature, but in this particular book, it was something that really, really stuck out to me in a particular way, in 2 ways, and it's something that I'm not sure I can forgive Anthony Trollope for. So this is the illustration. As you can see, these are very sketchy illustrations. They're just pen and ink and sort of done with the impression of being dashed off. So let's do the summary. The primary plot line of the books is about this young woman named Alice, who is getting on in years if you are a woman living in the Victorian era, because of course she is now about, I think, 24 by the time this book starts. And the thing about being 24 and unmarried in Victorian England, particularly in the upper classes, is you're running very, very close to the edge of being known as a perpetual old maid who will never get married because, well, that's just a huge personal failing on your part. And she starts off engaged to this man named John Gray. But the problem is, and it is a problem that is something that it's a difficulty that she is having before she leaves on the trip she goes on at the start of the books, at the start of this book, which is important because of things she says later, and it's that she's having some doubts about marrying him, some doubts about his unending certainty about things, because John Grey is somebody who is very, very certain in life. And he's not ambitious, which is a slight problem because she is ambitious. She wants to be married to somebody who's going places, and she wants to help him go those places. She's not a particularly feminist character, but she wants to be attached to people who are doing things. But anyways, so she's engaged to John Grey, and he is extremely handsome and clever and nice and good and kind and wealthy and yada 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 yada. He's all sorts of wonderful things. But his lack of ambition and his 110% certainty about what he's doing rub her the wrong way. And after she goes on a brief trip to Switzerland, a man she was engaged to previously tells her that, really you're making a mistake, and he's, too nice for you, and you're not going to fit well together. And she comes back and she decides, you know what? George was right. I'm not going to fit well with John Grey. And when John Grey comes and she says, listen, I am breaking off this relationship. I don't think we will be well matched. After all, I made a mistake. His response is basically to say, oh, you've lost your mind. Don't worry, dear. Call me whenever you're over having lost your mind, and I will take you back right away. And the fact that he's not even listening to her, listening to the fact that she has concerns, just puts her off further. And the thing is that the way this is written, you are 100% in charity with her view on things, that she's saying, look, I don't want to be in a relationship with somebody who is so certain of his rectitude that if somebody disagrees with them, he's not gaslighting or anything like that. He's just saying, well, no, you're just wrong. I mean, it's the kind of thing where if somebody says it enough, you might wind up accidentally being gaslighted, but he's not trying to do otherwise. He just is saying, no, you're just wrong. And she goes through this whole book through an abortive, problematic engagement to George, who she had been engaged to, and then he had done something wrong, possibly cheated on her. It's not entirely clear in the book, although maybe I'm not picking up on a subtlety that makes it clear. And then George turns out to be really, really awful after all, and then eventually she winds up engaged to John Grey again at the end. But the interesting thing is, as the book progresses, the omniscient third-person narrator's descriptions of her perspective. This omniscient narrator is saying, not necessarily, no, actually, I don't think he is a third-person narrator. It's more but it is an omniscient narrator, and this omniscient narrator's perspective changes with Alice's perspective, and it's very clever because it means that you understand why she's making every decision that she makes. The author isn't going into this saying her first decision is wrong. He's saying, here's what she was thinking at this time. Here was her logical train of thought. She wasn't making a dumb decision in that moment because you can see exactly why she's thinking what she's thinking. The real problem is that by the end of the book, Alice has made this 100%, 180-degree flip around where she basically is saying, you know what? I have decided that I need somebody to tell me how to do things and where to go and what to do. I have given up because I am clearly incapable of making my own decisions. And I feel a little bit like this is like we have been through this whole thing, seeing her side of things, understanding why she's doing all of this, and from that she decides that she is not capable of making logical decisions. But every decision that she made was rational in that moment that she was making it, which does not mean that she is incapable of making good decisions. It means that there were things she wasn't aware of or situations that changed. And so I find that ending particularly aggravating, because honestly I wish she would have washed her hands of both John Grey and her cousin and other fiancé George Vavasor, and had instead gone off with Geoffrey Palliser, who is the cousin of the titular Palliser, or a cousin in the titular Palliser family. I really wish she had gone off with him instead, because at least he wouldn't have been as irritating or as off-putting and horrible as either of those two men, but sure. There is also the story of the Lady Glencora, who was bullied into marrying a Lord Palliser, and the problem was that she was in love with this young man named Burgo, and Burgo is the kind of person who really just is a spendthrift. He's a nice enough guy, but he has no self-control and just runs wild, and wouldn't be great husband material, but she was in love with him, and she got bullied into marrying somebody, and the person she got bullied into marrying is somebody who she is a terrible, terrible match with. Now, by the time we run into her in the book, it's too late, she's married, and you have to deal with the hand that you've got. But he has no sense of humor, whereas she is an extremely whimsical kind of person, and it's very, very problematic because she will say things out of a sense of whimsy, and her husband will take it all too seriously and be scandalized and flail and panic, and it's a horrible, horrible match, and it's painful to read. I mean, it's looking at an understandable, conundrum of the period, but it's really, really horrible to read. You also have the story that the third line, which is Mrs. Greenbaugh, who is a wealthy widow who is being pursued by two men, one of whom is a farmer who is so desperate to prove that he would be a good match that he basically spends all of his time advertising how he has no debts, and look at all of this manure I own, and all of the furniture in my home is oak, and it's all very well and good, but he never seems to understand that maybe Mrs. Greenbaugh would like to hear why he wants to marry her, rather than just why should she marry him. Like, do you think she's beautiful, or are you just there because you want her money? The other man is kind of a wastrel, and he and Mr. Cheesacre get into constant fights over it. It's really rather distressing and parodic and genuinely ridiculous, and performs one of the few genuinely comedic sidebars in this whole novel, because the rest of this is just really kind of distressing to read. Alice is in a constant state of distress, and Glencora is not much better. But by the end of it, it's all resolved, and Glencora and Alice are the best of best friends, and Mr. Grey and Lord Palliser, Mr. Palliser, have Plantagenet Palliser, if you can believe it, have become very, very good friends as well, and Plantagenet Palliser has talked John Grey into having some ambitions, which makes Alice happy because it means she can finally have a husband with some sort of ambition who wants to actually do things. I'm not sure that if I wanted a husband who was ambitious, that I would want a husband who was only ambitious because somebody else had talked him into it, rather than because he actually wanted to be, but what can you do? Anyway, so that's the first of the Palliser novels, and I don't even know what to begin to expect with the rest of them, just that I will be gradually working through them over the course of the next several months. So 6 months from now, this series will be ended. So, that's everything, and, I guess... I don't think I have anything else to say. So that's everything, and I will see you all next week.